Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Side Quest. Today we've got a wonderful cast to chat with about the end of Warbreaker. Not just the end, but Warbreaker in general. We've got Slava and Spencer and a brand new guest, Casey. Howdy, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to meet y'all.
Hello.
Good to be back on the podcast.
That's right, Spencer. Always back. Always heightening your breath. Before we move forward in the discussion, Casey, you want to tell us a few fun but silly facts about yourself and maybe how Slava kidnapped you but didn't realize you were kidnapped until later on in your life?
That sounds like a reference to the book if I ever heard one.
It is. Welcome to the podcast.
That's what we do here.
I mean, I just got brought in on when I met him for a lunch, and he started talking about the podcast, and I was like, that's really cool. He goes, hey, you want to go on one? I was like, sure.
Oh, he lured you in.
Yes, I got
the side of
lured
a
in.
van, no windows, free podcast guesting.
Free candy.
Oh, sounds
Just
like
get
similar
inside.
to what Jonathan did to me. Huh.
No, I
Weird.
shoved you into it. You knew what you were getting into. I didn't
Lasso
hog
the
tie
man.
you.
But you pressured me for a while.
Yeah, but you were standing on the edge. I just kicked you over.
Fair
Wow.
enough.
Pretty severe.
He's still here. Look it. He's talking to you.
So, Nightblood's desire to destroy evil is akin to Jonathan getting people to read Sanderson.
Well, Jonathan getting people to move forward in life, albeit maybe they're not ready yet. I don't know. Spencer, you can talk to that.
Yeah, so I think Jonathan definitely pushed me in life to move forward with things that I wasn't comfortable with. But I think that's the mark of a good friend, because he wants to see growth in his friends. Sure, it might come off pushy, but you're not going to grow without being pushed by your friends. For me, that was the catalyst that I needed to pursue a career change. Pushy, but it was needed.
I'm just like Syl.
Yes.
I brought you these leaves.
The thing that you...
Not a one-to-one, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Not a one-to-one.
Yeah, I was like, it's like a little bit of the opposite.
Go kill
there.
yourself. Change careers.
You had two options, and you were like, well, they're kind of extreme. And I was like, yeah, they are. Here are these leaves for you. Kill yourself.
But luckily, I took the leaves and did the
Crumbled
opposite.
them up.
And
Stood
crumbled
at
them
the
up.
anarchasm and went, I guess I have something to live for. I guess I'll change careers.
Exactly.
Casey, we're referencing The Way of Kings, which, if you haven't listened to those episodes, you can read it and listen along and then see what our responses were, because we went like sections by section. So
Cool.
if you so desire to do that.
That's a really good book.
It is. And we're setting up to do Words of Radiance, which is book 2 in that series, where you may see some familiar faces from Warbreaker.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anywho, if you guys woke up tomorrow as returned and couldn't remember this life, what do you think your returned name would be?
Casey, since you're the guest of honor, why don't you go first?
I think my return name would something along the lines of Brave Slacker. I feel like I could do a lot, but I don't feel like it.
Yeah, makes sense. Spencer?
I think my name, well, the name that I would want to be versus the name that it actually would be are probably two different things. However,
Let's get
the
both
name,
those answers.
Well, I only came up with the one that I want, so that would be Shadow Flame.
Nice.
You gonna
Shadow
cut
Flame's
yourself
the
on
what?
all that edge?
What's that?
You gonna cut yourself on all that edge?
Yes, exactly.
Shadowflame the what? Because there's Warbreaker the Peaceful, Lightsong the Bold, Blushweaver the Caring, or some sort of thing. I don't remember. She wasn't my favorite character. Too many boobs.
Shadow Flame. Oh, I don't know. I didn't get that far. I'm not good. I'm sorry. I'm not good on the spot here. Shadow Flame, the indecisive.
It's supposed to be a virtue.
Well played.
Fair enough. Slava, what do you got?
Well, Slava, my name Slava already means glory. So
No.
I was, yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Somebody mute him. Mute him.
So I was thinking, and this is just to get your go, Jonathan, Don Shard the Glorious.
You're saying words to try to touch my goat, and I'll have you know that my goat's been dead for 27 years.
You're dead
That's
inside?
rude. No. My goat is. I would be Orange Juice the Vivacious.
Wah, wah, wah.
Sounds like you need more vitamin C.
Yeah.
Because I'm so juicy.
Or you can be something the coffee maker. It took you 10 hours to make your cup of coffee this morning.
9.5. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Touche.
All right, adventurers, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a side quest.
Indeed. So let's do a quick overview of the book we read, and then the four of us can get into it. So Warbreaker tells a story of two sisters, Vivenna and Ciri, of the country of Idris. Vivenna has been raised her entire life to marry the God King of the rival nation Halandran, in the hopes that this marriage will forestall Halandran's invasions of Idris, which they have been threatening for years. For reasons of political expediency, as well as personal preference of the king of Idris, Ciri, the younger sister, is sent instead, unprepared, in Vivenna's stead. Vivenna, feeling her life to be devoid of purpose after Ciri is sent in her place, follows her to Halandran in hopes of rescuing her. Both Ciri and Vivenna then become involved in intrigues intended to cause war between their home nation of Idris and Halandran, and attempt to prevent the war from happening separately. Ciri from within the government, and Vivenna by cooperation with the underground. At the same time, the novel tells the story of one of the returned members of the royal court, Lightsong, and his search for the truth behind the Halandran religion, as well as that of his own identity. Next story is that of Vasher, a mysterious character with a talking sword named Nightblood and an impressive mastery of biochromatic breaths. The book is set in the Cosmere, on the planet Nalthis, home to the Shard Endowment. It is told from Vasher's series, Vivenna's, and Lightsong's point of view. All right. Casey, as a first-time reader of Brandon Sanderson, what are your thoughts? Give us the good, the bad, and the ugly here in a minute or so.
All right. I'd say one of the best parts is that all the characters are really put together and well-written individuals. You can see most of their, not behavior, but I would say the passions and goals and dreams that they have going in, and just through a few chapters can determine what that character is going to look like at the beginning. But as well, character growth happens throughout the entire story, and each one ends up a different character, though still recognizably themselves at the end of it.
In your notes, you mentioned something that really stood out to me, is there's a lot of show, don't tell, and I really like that about how Sanderson describes the magic systems. You get thrust into them, you don't have like 9 pages of exposition explaining every little thing in some sort of encyclopedic manner. He shows you what this stuff is all about, and even though you might not understand everything by reading one book, you can follow along through the book. Did you feel the same way? And then for the rest of you too, if you could jump on that after Casey.
I did feel the same, particularly with power systems. It could be a bit tough. Tough would be a good word for it, to properly introduce a power system without it feeling exposition dumpy, where you have to establish some of the limitations of it and how it works before really getting into it. Otherwise, it can be just hand wavy and saying, yes, they did this thing, and you don't really understand what they're doing. So the way of slowly introducing new mechanics as you go along and, just showing how it works really helps to not just boost the writing, but also keep the reader invested in the story.
Spence?
One thing that I appreciated about this magic system is that we get to see it right away. The opening of the book, we see Vasher in prison, and he speaks a command into, I believe it was some sort of like cloth or a scarf or something.
It's like
and
a bundle of hay, I think.
Oh, that too. We get to see it right away, and so immediately my interest was piqued, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. How does this work? And I wanted to keep reading to find out. And, like you said, it wasn't exposition heavy. It didn't give you a whole lot of detail. And for me, I like the detail. I want to know all about it, how it works, why it works. On the opposite hand, for me, it's a little frustrating. Like, well, I want to know more about it. Why can't I know all of the details? But that was good because it kept my interest piqued the whole time, and I kept wanting to read more to find out what was going on and how this worked and where did this come from. Some of those answers we still don't, unfortunately, know yet. But
Facts.
and that's frustrating because I don't know if
There's always
we're...
another secret.
There's always
Is
another
that not
secret.
what you're going to say?
No, but it's a good point because I don't know when we're going to see a next, like a Warbreaker sequel, which I think is going to be Nightblood, the name of the book. He's already said that somewhere along the way, but
Years ago.
yeah. But I really appreciated the fact that Sanderson right away introduced the magic, like in the prologue, and I was like, okay, I definitely need to find out what's going on here.
Yeah, the prologue, just like Jonathan says over and over again, and it's a point that should be, stated over and over again.
Can't be stated enough, honestly.
Agreed. The prologue is a great hook. Now, for me, admittedly, and I said this in the previous episode, chapter 1, that's when I was finally hooked. But the prologue was enough for me to keep reading. It wasn't just like, oh, well, this is silly and I don't like it. Very few books are like that for me anyway. But after chapter 1, I was fully hooked. And that's probably because you have the intrigue, if you will. In the prologue, it ends and you're like, oh, okay, Vasher and a sentient sword. That's cool. And then you get the view of a different kingdom. And you have Ciri and Vivenna and how they're how they're the opposites and their little point of views. And then Ciri's on a carriage going to Halandren. So all those three things together, that's where I was just hooked. The first time reading. That was it. I was a fan right away.
Well, I'm also thinking about your first reading of it, Slava, and you went in with this expectation about what the fantasy genre was going to be. And you're like, well, if it's, dragons and swords and orcs, and it's not Lord of the Rings, I don't really care, sword and board kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's not. So your expectation was flipped because you're like, I don't know what this is, but it's not bad.
Right.
Was kind of like your original thought when we did this book 3 years ago. And for those who are new, and if you're diving in now, this was actually the first book that we did for our test episodes for the podcast. Not good enough to release because we learned a lot of things recording those 2 episodes of like, wow, we can't fit a full book into a single episode. Wow, we sound like idiots.
Yeah.
The basics.
Not much has changed.
That's clearly Casey
right for
got
the
some
jugular.
coaching. Casey got some coaching before
right out of
this
the bat.
episode. Okay.
So that reversal of expectations, not only were my expectations reversed about the fantasy in general, the book has 2 or 3 of those for the reader, where you're expecting something, and I don't know if the opposite happens, but the thing that you were expecting doesn't happen. With the priests, with the God King, with the mercenaries, those things jump out specifically. And despite me never thinking Vasher was a bad guy, Jonathan, you might remember from last episode, I said I knew he was important enough for Sanderson to keep, but I thought he was passing through, if you will. And I was more focused on the other characters during my first read-through. But I was caught off guard by Bluefingers. I didn't expect Denth to be some upstanding citizen. He's, after all, a mercenary. But I didn't think he was actually kidnapping Vivenna. I didn't think he was there in her best interest, but I didn't expect him to be as bad, air quotes, of a guy as he turned out to be. that was something that I enjoyed throughout the book too, as well as the political intrigue, because you can have political intrigue done in a preachy, up your own ass kind of way, where the author brings in modern day politics and tries to make some sort of self-aggrandizing allegory and preach at you. But this is just politics, and it happens to be set in this world. The way he weaved that story, that was pretty fantastic in my opinion.
Very much so.
When I first read through the prologue and then it switched to Ciri and Vivenna's points of view after reading about Vasher and his Nightblood sword, the first thought in my head as I was continuing through the chapters is, when is this guy going to make his return? Because you don't lead with a hook like that and not have it come back later. It's like Chekhov's gun. You put something in front of the audience, they're going to expect it to come back and make, a return at a later date.
Can you tell us what Chekhov's gun is real quick?
Chekhov's gun, I think it refers back to either an old movie or an old play where there was a gun that was set up onto a mantelpiece. And that gun in the first act is established as being there. And in a later act, like the fourth act or something like that, it ends up getting pulled off of the mantelpiece and used against one of the other characters. So it's establishing a tool or a piece of the narrative at a very earlier point that will be used in some way at a future date.
Good stuff. Now, Jonathan, you didn't really answer the question, so I'd like to give you some time to do that about showing, not telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes the side quests can get away from us. That's one of the pieces that I think Sanderson does really well, is instead of giving us, similar to what Casey said and Spencer said with the exposition of, this is the 15 encyclopedia description of how breaths work and heightenings and all of the levels and stuff, and then we just have 2 chapters of that, and then we get into the story. He's like, well, I'm going to give you a little mystery. I'm going to make you think you know how it works, and then I'm going to slowly reveal how it doesn't work through limitations and discovery, which he does very well in other books too, like Mistborn, Stormlight Archives. Ones that we have even less information on would be Shadows for Silence Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, and The Emperor's Soul, which Slava has not read yet. Those are short stories, but those are set in different worlds and different things are going on, but the magic systems are still adhering to Sanderson's 3 laws of magic. And his first law is that limitations are more important than the powers themselves, which is notable compared to most other people who work magic systems out in their books, because they just make fun magic systems that they find interesting, which is a good, I guess I'd say, like, first edition of discovering your world. But Sanderson took it to a new level where he's like, not only am I going to figure out how my magic system works, I'm going to figure out how it doesn't work and use that as one of the major plot devices for his characters to both grow in using their new magical powers and grow in character development, because he shows it to us rather than just telling it to us.
That's really good.
So,
really good explanation.
Yeah, what are the other 2, for Casey's benefit, what are the other 2 laws?
Spencer, do you remember? I'll give you a chance here.
Okay, the first law of magic, according to Sanderson, is an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. The third one is to expand what you already have before you add something new. So there's Sanderson's laws of magic, and I think we see him implement that very well in this story.
Yeah.
How do you apply, let's thought experiment this and measure Sanderson against Sanderson, right? So we talked about the prologue. In the prologue, we see type 1, type 3, and type 4 entities of biochromatic breath. Sanderson's first law says an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. But in the prologue, he's introducing it to us. I'm going to toss this over to Casey and Spencer, our resident expert and our new guest, to think through and kind of just talk us through how he's introduced us to the magic system, but also measuring that against his own first law of magic.
I would say that even though we see Nightblood, the Type 4, off the bat, and we can see the result of what it does, we don't get a good picture of what actually happens when they take Nightblood. And it's this obfuscation that he performs that lets him meet with that first law. He solved the problem. He solved it off screen, so to speak. We can't actually see how the problem was solved. We do know that Nightblood had to do something with it, and that it's, technically speaking, alive in some way. But we're not ever told until later what exactly it is. So it's a mystery that starts off the thing. But we do see him perform the first type of awakening on the cloth and then the straw doll, which when he first made it, I was like, oh yeah, it's some voodoo thing then. He's got to put his own hair on it in order to get it to mimic a human body. So there's a lot of that going through my mind when I first saw it. But then as we continue going along, you could see more of, oh, it just keeps going.
Yeah, and I think too from what I know about Biochroma is the more human something looks, the easier it is to command. So that's why Vasher used the hair on the doll in order to make it. I think he used less breath than he normally would have to make the doll move. But I think we see it evolve throughout the story, like how magic is used to solve problems. Yes, we get the introduction to it there in the prologue. As we said before, it definitely hooks you as like, okay, this is interesting. I want to know more about how this works. But he's not just going to, dump that immediately in the prologue or even in the first couple of chapters. He's going to, sprinkle it in throughout the book. And I think he does that well. And by the end of the book, you definitely understand what Nightblood is and how he kills his victims. I guess we know how Nightblood was made, but I still don't think we understand all of the nuances, like what went on behind the scenes there in order to make him. So yeah, Nightblood's a super, super interesting character.
Right. So what Casey said is very interesting. I didn't even think of it. We get the Type 4 entity dumped on us right in the beginning, and then we learn more about it at the end. And types 1, 2, and 3 are sprinkled throughout the book, and then Vasher explains them and refuses to explain 4. So let's take that as a jumping off point for talking about Nightblood specifically, because I want to really get into this. To me, Nightblood is single-minded in his quest to destroy evil. He's made by Vasher and Shashara, who happens to be his wife, and we know that somehow Vasher caused her death. Denth thinks he killed her, or Denth tells us that he killed her. And so that's why Denth and Vasher are at odds with each other, which is probably something we'll get when Nightblood comes out. We'll get the details behind that and
I
how...
thought that Vasher himself said that he couldn't let her continue to exist with the knowledge of how to do that sort of thing.
He does say that. Apparently he kills his wife. That's great. More on that in the next book. Do you guys think that whatever command they gave Nightblood, it didn't work out as they expected? Because he wants to destroy evil. Was that the command given to him when they were making him? Because all awakened objects need a command.
I think so. I feel if they were trying for something else, then a different command would have been better. Something like protect the innocent or something like that. But with the command that they gave him, it feels to me like the sword would have been best used basically as a war crime. You hand it to one of your soldiers, like returned or something with a ton of breaths, and send them off like a living berserker into an enemy line. And there's nothing really that can stop them until they run out.
Well, the lifeless, if that's what the implication is here, that you'd give it to a lifeless.
No,
when you
returned.
Either way, when you draw Nightblood, it destroys the souls. It eats the souls. Sorry, it eats the breaths that you're holding. So that's why Vasher, we see near the end of the book, can only hold Nightblood for a short amount of time, and then he's drained of the amount of breath that he's captured because Nightblood absorbs the breath units.
Yeah, so Vasher will first absorb any form of investiture that you have, which
I mean, Nightblood. Nightblood wouldn't absorb.
yeah. Sorry, Nightblood will absorb any form of investiture that you have. Once your investiture is gone, which in this case is breaths, then he'll start to devour your soul because your soul is also a small piece of investiture.
Spencer, can you tell us what investiture is real quick for the audience? Just a very broad stroke thing. We haven't gotten into it, and I haven't shared this with Slava yet, so you're gonna flash him with your investitures.
Okay, well, I'll see how good I can do with this here. All throughout the Cosmere, every planet has a form. Well, not every planet. Most of the stories that we see in the Cosmere, the planets that they take place on have a magic system, and the magic is investiture. I guess maybe this is spoiling it for Slava or for Casey, but the shard invests the planet with investiture. Like, that's where the magic comes from, is the shard's power that was on that planet. And you'll definitely learn more about shards if you continue reading the Cosmere.
So is it something that's like outside of the physical realm?
Yes and no. It's both, I think. But mostly it manifests itself in the physical realm. But that's what the magic is. So breaths are a form of investiture. It's kind of what we call the magic in the Cosmere. So, like, for Slava, you've read The Way of Kings. Stormlight is a form of investiture.
Right.
So each world gets its own unique brand of investiture.
Each world gets its own magic system. Magic systems function on investiture.
So they're laws to investiture?
Guess we'll have to read and find out.
Like laws of magic, laws of investiture?
That's a future episode hook if I ever heard one.
Well, like there's types of entities. There's the diversity of biochromatic breath. I'm wondering if there's laws to investiture.
Guess we'll have to read and find out.
No, yeah, okay. Raffo this.
Absolutely. See, now you're on the right track, though.
Yeah, I got your Raffo right here.
You need to work on your evil laugh, man. That's just more humorous than evil.
I'm just here to entertain myself. That's why I agreed to start a podcast with Slava.
When I first saw Nightblood and started getting hints about it, I actually didn't think it was part of Awakening. I thought it was an out of context problem, like something completely foreign, because sometimes that can be a really interesting narrative thing where an alien object, something that shouldn't exist and isn't actually reasonably explained by the in-universe laws, is dropped into a story, and people just have to work around this thing, whatever it is, that's completely foreign and alien to their own power system.
So I guess my final question about investiture, is it something that is constant or a little bit more like the Force? I don't know. That's not the right question. That's two questions in one. Is it something constant that is like that permeates the Cosmere? It is a thing that can be accessed, but it itself is a constant moving thing.
Don't
judge me, Jonathan, just because I can make logical leaps.
Raffo.
All right.
I'll tell you this, Slava. The prologue from Words of Radiance that you read has some relevance to investiture.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
So with investiture, there are definitely rules. As we know, rules are meant to be broken.
Wait, let me answer. Guess you'll have to read further to find out.
Right.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
You can bend the rules with investiture, is what you're saying.
I think, Slava, your original question was somewhere along the lines of, when they awakened Nightblood, did it go as according to plan, how they thought it would? I don't think it did, because it was too vague of a command, destroy evil. When you're making something, sometimes you don't know how it's going to turn out until it actually does. In this case, they were sort of narrow-minded when they gave him that command because, like, oh yeah, everybody knows what evil is, but then you tell this inanimate object who has just become sentient to destroy evil, he or it has no context of what evil is because it has just become sentient. And so therefore, he just destroys everything because he assumes that's what evil is. And even Vasher trying to teach him, he still doesn't understand, but because of the nature of now what he is, that's all he does is just consume. So he is destroying evil, but he's also destroying good.
To your note, Spencer, if I can continue on this conversation for a little bit, you wrote, Nightblood as a character forces us to think about the nature of evil and how differently it is perceived by different people. Hold that thought. When Nightblood is thrown into a group of soldiers, they are drawn to it somehow, and even if they don't take it out of its sheath, they impale themselves on it, hilt and sheath and all. There seems to be something that Nightblood does, or its aura it does, that even, let's say, neutral people, just a soldier doing his job, all of a sudden impales himself on it. So when he destroys evil, he kind of destroys everything around him.
No. So the guards aren't neutral, though. In your example, the guards are actually evil because we see the contrast when Vivina is made to touch the sword when Vasher first captures her and throws it at her, and she feels nauseous. And so there's a difference between people who are pure that are around Nightblood versus people who have lust and evil in their heart and they want to take it. And we also see the same thing when he throws Nightblood in the Court of Gods, and then Lightsong is detective working like, what was it like? And he was segmenting each of the people off to share their story individually. We get conflicting stories. Well, I had to pick it up. And then we see the guy's hand is drained of color because Nightblood devours investiture and souls briefly.
I stand corrected.
You're sitting.
I sit corrected.
But, like, if Vivenna, she's not drawn to the sword like maybe a soldier was, but if she were to hold Nightblood, it would still consume her.
Draw Nightblood.
Or she would draw it, yeah.
Right, if she were to draw the sword, yep.
Although I don't know if we have an example of someone holding Nightblood here on the stem and not drawing him. You know what I mean? Like, is there a limitation that once drawn, we know this black smoke comes out, right? But if they just hold him here sheathed, does it do the same thing? You know what I mean? Like, we don't see that in the other books that we see Nightblood in, and we don't see that in Warbreaker here. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Where if you draw it by the hilt and it's not out of the sheath, will it still, hurt people?
That's what I'm saying. I think the answer is no, because every time he describes Nightblood doing something where the black smoke is coming out and or people are being injured or their investiture consumed, is the clasp is always undone and it's like a little bit out and then he puts it back. That's why I think that Nightblood is and Spencer, that video that I sent you, like, I'm pretty sure Nightblood's sheath is silver.
Oh, interesting. That would explain why it can contain him. That's super interesting.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, but I'd also though be curious to go see where Nightblood's used in the other books, and when he consumes, is he being held? Yeah, I don't know. I just have to go check those out. That'd be interesting to know.
Nightblood's sheath is made of aluminum.
But that also works too because aluminum
it does,
blocks investiture.
Yeah.
Oh, so there are laws.
There are
Raffo.
There are things, Slava, that exist in this Cosmere that you will continue to find out. I did, as a note to the audience, I did give Slava a list of approved reading items that we aren't going to get to for a long time. Tress of the Emerald Sea, The Emperor's Soul, Elantris, and Edge Dancer.
I like to point out that that's not that altruistic of Jonathan to give me this list. Because none of them answer shit.
You haven't read them. You don't know what they answer. But here's the thing. The Cosmere is vast and ever expanding currently.
Well, I'm learning about what Voidbringers are and aren't, apparently, in the Edge Dancer. Sort of.
So you are reading Edge Dancer.
I started reading Edge Dancer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I know. Fantastic.
Good.
Wall climbing and thievery and all sorts of stuff.
Fun.
Lift is a super fun character.
She's super unique.
Yeah. Yeah, I like her.
I think, yeah. That's one of the reasons I recommend it as one of the things that you can dive into, because she doesn't get a main play for a while. That, like, it's going to take us a while to get to where she is. And she's your Ciri. She's your, forget other characters that you liked in books that were female. But
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit. Let's try to talk in English first.
Say it in Russian.
Давай будем говорить about plot.
Нет.
So, нет. So,
Здоровья.
Yes. So, let's talk about the plot. There's two things going on. Two sisters, two cities. I think that's a great setup. And prologue aside, as good as it is, the story is really about two sisters and two cities. And it could be done poorly because you can get lost, you can get clunky. But to somebody's point, I think before the recording, I think it was Casey, character POVs change mid-chapter sometimes, and it seems seamless. And after a while, Two Sisters, Two Cities really becomes, two sisters within one city and two factions fighting for something. So there's series of twos kind of going throughout the whole book, which I thought was well done. That was fantastic, I thought, because it keeps the pace that Casey did mention. It keeps the pace going. It's easy to escalate with that kind of storytelling technique.
Funny enough, even with that 2 and 2 thing that you're talking about, their own character arcs, I feel, are mirrors of each other, where one is forced into the situation the other would have been in. And so they end up meeting somewhere in the middle with both their characters changed by the end.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I hadn't considered that it was, just two cities and two sisters, that sort of whole story plotline going on. It is really, really cool to see. And I think Ciri was forced into a situation that she had no training for. And Vivenna, I wouldn't say she was forced into her situation, because she chose to go to Hallandren to rescue Ciri. But in the process of that, she ends up changing quite a bit. And her training, I don't think, prepared her for what she went through. Maybe, Casey, you mentioned this either in your notes or at some point in the chat, but how Ciri probably ends up doing a better job with the God King than Vivenna would have in that situation. And the story would have probably not turned out very good if Vivenna ended up being the one in with the God King. So yeah, I like the dynamic there between the two basically opposite personalities and how they actually ended up benefiting each other for the situation that they were in.
Although I think Ciri running around with Denth and Tanfa would have been fun. I think her in that situation, she would have been ruining their lives.
They would have slit her throat before the halfway mark of the book.
Yeah.
It's either that or she's going to end up escaping and running rampant through the city.
Like an awakened squirrel.
Yes.
Yeah. She's somehow going to unintentionally completely ruin their plans.
Right.
I always love characters that just exist to be the monkey wrench.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Let's take a left turn here and tell me about the Court of Gods. Like, what was your experience when diving through this, Casey and Slav? I know this is your second time, but like, did you think it was? Well, I don't want to put thoughts in your head. Like, what are your initial takes? What were some of the expanded thoughts you had about the Court of Gods, the gods themselves, et cetera, and being returned or anything like that?
Go ahead, Casey. You're the guest of honor.
All right. So my initial impression of each of the gods when they get introduced is, oh, they're named ironically, because with like Blushweaver, she's called Blushweaver the Honest, but throughout the entire thing, she feels as political and back-dealing as possible throughout the entire thing. The opposite of honest, almost. Whereas Lightsong is called the Bold, but he's never even given a chance to be bold because he's trapped inside a palace. So even if him being bold is what got him returned to begin with, you don't actually get to see him be bold until he finally searches it out himself. So the returned might be able to embody those concepts that they are told about that they are, but they're never even given a chance to by the priesthoods that are there to supposed to protect them, to find that opportunity for them to, return, or the purpose for which they returned, I should say. And so it feels like they have this concept assigned to them, and the priesthood, ironically, is forcing them not to embody that.
To me, it seemed like this grandiose thing, right? There's this religion of Halandren and these gods. And again, the breaths thing, their duties as gods, all of that aside, it seems there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, and there are priests debating, and their servants, and the gods are eating to their heart's content, drinking to their god's content, and they play, sports during their leisure time. So it seems like a typical kind of palace with very important and powerful people, but it quickly is revealed that it's kind of a prison. The gods don't have as much power as even their worshippers think they do, which to me was a nice twist. It seems that the priests are in control.
Yeah.
And there's some priests, like Scoot, that seems to be a good person, right?
Scoot!
Larimar is too complicated. I'm going to call you Scoot.
The God King's priests and servants are obviously like the really bad ones, right? They're the bad guys. They're the most conniving. But it makes me wonder, what about Blushweaver's priests? What about Mercy Seats or All Mothers? Because if the gods aren't allowed to leave, and it is a fancy prison at the end of the story, is at least how I see it, I wonder how many of the other priests, maybe in a different level, to a different extent, are just as conniving as the God Kings.
Well, something to think about is the fact that at the end of the book, several of the Pon Call are imitating priests in their robes. Makes me think how many Pon Calls infiltrated the priesthood and how long this plot has been going on. Like, he said that the current batch of gods is not up to the same par as the previous ones. This might be a semi-recent thing with the rebellion fermenting, that the priests have been replaced by Pon Call individuals who are trying to cut off the head of the government, so to speak.
And the priests also have access to Lifeless, right? Just in case something happens to a god, some of the gods have given them
the command words.
The command words, yeah.
Yeah, only 4 of the gods have access to the Lifeless. They divided their army up into 4 units so that nobody had all of them.
Right. But
Mercy Star, Lightsong, Hope Finder, and All Mother, originally.
But their priests have access to it.
Right.
And some of the priests are awakeners. So that leads me to think, how deep does the rabbit hole go?
That's a fair question. I could see at some point in Nightblood or additional Nalthis stationed novels having some sort of large priest collection or cabal come together to start amassing their own set of army, because it only takes one breath and some Ichor alcohol to create a Lifeless. And then all you need is just the bodies. But if you had them and you kept bringing them, like, let's say you worked at a graveyard, right? Let's just say that. And you had a brother who was a priest who regularly had access to breaths. It seems to me that it'd be a really easy, fun story to tell if they just buried people's dead in a ceremonial type way and then didn't actually bury the dead and instead brought them into a cave and turned them into lifeless, and then started amassing an army, and then tried to take over parts of Nalthis. Sanderson, you're welcome. I want some rights.
So I want to shift gears again, because something that has been bothering me, and I haven't brought it up in our conversations at all.
You can't replace me.
But no, obviously not. There's only one like you, Jonathan.
The staggering heat death that is occurring in the universe.
Yeah. The treaty with Idris. It's sort of kind of explained, and you get a little bit of a backstory towards the end of the book. But I think that would be an interesting novella, like a Warbreaker 0.5, right? Or a Warbreaker 1.2. Some sort of standalone story that explains how that came about. So the question I have is this treaty. All right, so Dedelin is going to give his daughter, specifically Vivenna, to the God King, specifically the fifth one, Susebron. And that would legitimize the court's claim to something? The throne?
The throne, yeah, because they were the former royal family.
Right. So the mini-war, something happened in the mini-war where all the Idrians, tails between their legs, ran away. But why were they running away if they were heirs and children of a returned? Well, what made them run away? How was Helendron taken over then, and why was this treaty made?
I think it's a fair speculation to say that when Warbreaker tasked the priests with holding on to his breath, you and I both know how easy it is for a set of priests to try and take over a station of area because of their power and position, and then they do what Nightblood does. Destroy evil, right? They have protect these breaths. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Cool. So from now on, we're going to cut out the tongue of every God King, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and they just make all these rules because everybody wants to be Jewish.
I was about to say something about the, not the Philistines, the
Tell me I'm wrong, Slava.
The Pharisees, yeah.
Yeah. You're not wrong, Jonathan. So
it's music to my ears.
Was that painful to say, Slava?
It was.
I can't wait till I ask my wife to start saying it to me too.
Take 1d4 of psychic damage, Slava.
That's right.
Well played.
That's right.
Blue Fingers. How long has he been at it, too? Right?
He's human, so I mean, he, at least, less than 100 years, I'd say.
Okay. I've kind of lost speed with that question, but I think that it would be interesting if, even in this book, I would have liked, shut up, Jonathan, maybe another 15 pages explaining some of this history. This would be something that would just be elixir to my heart.
So in the Stormlight Archives, every Stormlight Archive book that we read and have, in that book, there is a book talked about that is the name of the book that the book is, right? So Way of Kings, there's a book called The Way of Kings in The Way of Kings that he pulls pieces from. In Words of Radiance, there is a book called Words of Radiance that he pulls pieces from. In Oathbringer, there are pieces of the book Oathbringer that he pulls pieces from, and so on and so forth. So Sanderson is not above sharing history with us in world through the library that exists and the knowledge that exists in world, which is partly why he has these 5 scholars, because there's a lot of play here. We talked about Nightblood earlier, and they made Nightblood in ignorance, right? They didn't know what they didn't know because they thought they were doing something good, and they found out, oh no, we did something bad, because a lot of times great inventions and good intent is met with, hey, you didn't think about how you could use this negatively, and then it gets used negatively, right? Or there's some sort of ramification they didn't account for, because we can't know all things because we're human. So he will probably give us something like that, Slava. He hasn't said any of that in any of the information that I've seen. And Spencer and I go back and forth on this a lot of just like, what are the words of Brandon? What are the books we've read? And what are the things we can understand? And the things that he's committed to. And Sanderson's really good about follow through with his commitments. He will eventually make a Nightblood book because he said he was going to, which means that he probably already has a draft if I were to guess, that no one has read. So there are things that are in the works because he's really good about keeping his own secrets. What's it like to be married to him? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I just looked it up, and I think I answered my question. The rebellion in Warbreaker happened in the year 327, whatever that means. And it was the Pankal Rebellion that started all this. And apparently Idris supported them, which was kind of alluded to in the book anyway. So there we go. I kind of have my answer. And don't judge me. Don't tell me that that spoiled Oathbringer and 17 other books by Brandon Sanderson. That didn't spoil anything. That just answered an in-world question.
21 books.
That answered an in-world question.
6 novellas and 3 short stories are now ruined.
Yeah.
Thank you, Slava. The Cosmere's connected. You haven't, acknowledged this, but you do continue to do research on it.
Explain to me how this ruins anything. What I just
Casey,
read.
do you have any stories or do you have any questions?
Tell us a story.
Casey, tell us a story about a time from your youth.
Where you ruined something for somebody.
For your parents.
Well, there was one time where I ended
Nobody
up...
actually cares. Go back to the book. Ask us a question about the book.
Question about the book. Ever feel like there was something off about any of the characters? Like there is something... Because you get hints through, let's say, Tonk Fa, that there is definitely something off about him.
Autism.
I mean, not exactly, considering what we found in the basement. I think that's just more undiagnosed sociopathy.
Yeah, if Rain Man had sociopathy, that would be Tonfa.
I was thinking more like, tell me about the rabbits, George.
Speaking of rabbits, a stupid joke came into my brain this morning. That Nightblood kind of reminds me of the rabbit from the Monty Python, where you think it's just a sword, but he just murders the living shit out of everybody who approaches it.
It's just the one tooth, though. It doesn't just have teeth.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just the one sword.
Casey, what was your last question?
Did you notice anything that was a hint to a future development with the characters earlier, like with Tonka? You could see that he kept missing pets.
Yeah, I did see that originally when I read the book. There was something to me, I didn't catch it at all, the first time through. But I knew that there was something just not quite right, in my head. I knew something wasn't quite right, but I didn't know what it was. So I just kind of played it off as oh, it's just this, I don't know, random thing that keeps happening. I didn't pick up on it until all of a sudden we find out what Tonk Fa is, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that explains all of the missing animals. But yeah, there was definitely something about those two that was they definitely drew you in with their banter back and forth.
A murderous Abbott and Stella.
Right. That's a good way to put it. But because I initially liked those two, but now looking back,
we all did.
Yeah, and I was really, really frustrated when we found out what they were.
You got son.
Got.
I mean, it's part of storytelling. Evil gets to be charismatic because otherwise it's just boring.
Yeah, that makes sense. I enjoyed. Well, I don't know if I enjoyed, but it was nice to see a plot twist that I didn't see coming. And really just being thrown. And I think that shows to how good of an author Brandon is. With those two characters, he really pulls you into the story, and you really like them. And then all of a sudden, they turn out to be evil, I guess, or bad. And it really makes you feel bad and disappointed in them. So yeah, I appreciated that about those characters, is that I liked them. He brought me in, and then all of a sudden he changes. And now they're the bad guys.
Are you talking about the Lord of Scars? No, just me? Okay, all right, it's fine.
No, yeah, yep, just you.
I don't have a good answer for that question, Casey. I think I called Parlin's death. I was kind of expecting him to die, something to happen to him, especially after that conversation with Vivenna on the staircase.
I mean,
the one where he's like, "You're actually pretty mean to me."
Yeah, you're actually a bit of a bitch.
That one hit home for me in a very specific way that only Slava will understand.
Yep. No, and nothing. It's just that, like, after that conversation, I'm like, I think he may die. I don't know how he's going to die, but something might happen to him.
I felt after that conversation that he was going to help, Denth and Tongfa Jewel instead of her. That was my impression after that, was that he was going to be more in line with them. So them killing him was a bit of a shock to me.
Bit of a mercy kill almost.
I'm pretty sure that wasn't very merciful, given that what else we found in the bottom there.
Didn't they cut his cheeks from mouth to ear?
I don't know how I got these scars.
Yeah. I was on a planet called Nalthus. Who wants to start landing this plane? Or what should we land it with? Jonathan, you're good at landing things.
I want the record to show that Slava has acknowledged
He's taking
some
a
of my
big
strengths.
sip of that coffee.
Well, it's been brewing for 3 hours.
Oh my god.
Had all the colors drained out of it.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
I got
Go for it.
I got
Spence.
something. So before we started recording, we were talking about our favorite characters and most hated characters. So I just wanted to bring this up a little bit here, where Vivenna is probably my favorite character of the show. Yikes. Of the book, and Slava, turns out, hated Vivenna, at least originally.
With a righteous indignation.
With the fury of 1,000 suns.
So,
1,000 breaths.
So, Slava, why did you hate Vivenna? I'm curious.
Because he hates all things that are
Let
good.
me put up my
Yeah.
notes. Well, I got a whole thing on Vivenna. And why I hate it.
71 pages.
Single spaced. No
Size-
margins. Just
size 10 font.
Yep.
It may not surprise anybody. Slava's also never been to therapy, so
When I first read this, I didn't like Vivenna at all. The first time, and I'm going to use Siri's word for her. She was starchy and ignorant and talked down on people and seemed to kind of lift her nose at things she didn't understand. Not even at things that she possibly could have understood but thought were beneath her and had an opinion, even at things that weren't clear to her. She was like, oh, well, whatever. Obviously that's wrong. As you said earlier, Spencer, we've kind of all been there to some extent. And the fact that she grows by the end of the book, and this is something I said in the previous episode, she knows there's nothing for her in Halandrin. She definitely knows there's nothing for her in Idris. And she decides to stay with Vasher and go on a different route, on a different adventure. Her life now is completely different. She knows it. Vasher understands it and lets her come along. I think that's a great character arc for her. She realizes that there's a lot of stuff she doesn't know, and this new road is the best one for her. So that arc is great. But her as a character, especially the first time, it reminded me of people that I grew up in the fundamentalist movement. And that's exactly why you identify with her, because you grew up in that world too. And we've all done it, even me, to kind of accept those blinders and act the way Vivenna does. So there's a little bit of me in Vivenna for sure, but there's a lot more of Siri in me because I rebelled against that really quickly on that, and that's why I identify with Siri more. But why I hated the character of Vivenna, especially in like the first few instances that we get to see her with Denth, was that. But I'm glad that she's redeemed. And really, most of my hate for her is born out of the fact that I want to give Jonathan as hard of a time as I can.
That's fair.
Yeah.
we're all so aware of that.
I mean, she's a character written to be hated, at least to begin with, to be hated.
And that's the testament to Sanderson's writing. We've talked about this numerous times. He writes people well. That's just fact up top, heading then he writes, because of that, his women characters, his female characters, are really well done. So Vivenna is not a two-dimensional brat that's just bratty for the sake of being bratty. Ciri is not just this vivacious, kind of cute, ditzy little girl. No, there's depth to both characters. Even Blushweaver, she is not just some vivacious bimbo who's trying to connivingly alter certain events. She has an agenda. She's doing what she thinks is right, and she has reasons for it, even though you might hate Blushweaver because she F's up a lot of stuff for everybody.
She's over-endowed.
By no fault of her own. What am I saying? Yes, I was ignoring your pun, because I didn't make the puns on this show. Damn it. That's funny.
So I was just going to interrupt you, Slava. So, Casey, you said Vivena's written to be hated. Talk through that with us. Like, why do you think that that's the case? Why is she written to be hated?
At least in the beginning, she's written as a character that you're not really supposed to be rooting for, because the decisions that she's made from an outside point of view are just plain stupid to begin with.
At which point in the plot? Sorry.
At the very beginning of the plot, when she first makes her decision to go out and make her own decisions. It's the first decisions she's really made. So the decisions are childishly foolish because she hasn't been allowed to make any herself in the past. She's been forced into a position that she has to be, this perfect princess. And she's been raised that way. So it's understandable that she acts like a spoiled brat because she was raised as a rich, spoiled brat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we sympathize more with her sister, because her sister, even if she's privileged, she doesn't really enjoy all of that privilege. She just wants to run off into the hills or whatever.
Can I focus on something real quick? Why is Vivenna making her first decisions and then making mistakes in those decisions when, to your point, she's never been allowed to make decisions before to be looked down on?
It's more like you're supposed to look at her decisions and go, no, what are you doing? No, stop. Because a lot of childish decisions are stupid decisions. And she makes a lot of them in the first part of the book. And so you're sort of face-palming along the way as you're reading with her. Yeah, you can understand from a certain point of view, okay, she doesn't know better, but she's a grown woman at this point. She's 22. She probably should know better. It's hard to continue reading without getting frustrated.
So you said she should know better because of her age. So this is actually one of the through lines Slava and I briefly touched on in one of the previous episodes for Warbreaker, because this is a book about coming of age, and we briefly talked about that. But why should she know better just because she's 22? If she, to your point again, was raised in a very specific way where her life was always on mission. It's like, you're going to marry the God King, and here are the 101 ways that you have to perform and prepare to do this one task. And this is to your point where it's like, if she was raised that rigidly, then why should she be judged for having to first make her own decisions when she's never been allowed to before? When you would expect that someone who's never made decisions before, like someone who comes out of a cult. I don't know if you've ever read, Slava, what was that Chuck Palahniuk book we read? Survivor.
Like, I haven't, I can understand the basic idea of
when someone's raised a specific way to believe specific things, that it would be difficult for them to embrace let's call it the real world, right? When they have no idea about the real world at all because they were never given the opportunity. So I'm just challenging your opinions because I think it's a nice contrast for the episode.
I think at some point we can have empathy for all the people who've gone through all the stuff and understand why they've done certain things. Like, we can trace the line of events that led them to make dumb and bad decisions, and we can show them empathy. But at the same time, if you're 50 or 22 or 17, there are some things that you should know, and you don't get a pass. you just don't get a pass because you were raised in a cult. That's why Viviana is aggravating, and I am aggravated by her character because it doesn't give her a pass. My past does not give me a pass for some of the stuff I have done as a young person.
But these aren't like life-altering things where she stabbed someone and like acted.
Well, neither
like
are mine.
guy...
I've never stabbed somebody.
Right, but that's just my point. Is like Survivor, right? This guy's going out doing things. He's cleaning people's houses. Viviana's going and trying to make decisions as a princess, someone who's born into royalty, and she's like doing the best she can with what she was trained with, which is clearly, as we've said, not the right information to live on the streets. So like she doesn't have the experience. So I think that you're wrong.
Her first decision, the first one that she makes, is to go to a foreign, potentially hostile city that her father has told her is actively plotting to start a war against them with no plan aside from, I'm going to save my sister with this guy that I brought with me.
I think I missed the question. Was there a question in there? Sorry.
No, that was my answer in a way. You know, even though you say, yeah, with her age and sort of following up with Slava's, there's certain things. If she's being raised to be, you know, a royal princess, a good decision making should have been one of the things that they taught her during that period of time while she was getting raised. You think that, you know, understanding, you know, policy and how to advise would be some of the things they taught her, and yet she doesn't use any of that knowledge when making her first decision. That's one of my biggest gripes.
But why does she not use that information that we will just assume that she was taught, right? Because she's royalty. Because it tells us why, not exclusively in words, but it tells us why in those first couple chapters when we're seeing her thought process. It's that she was set up for doing a specific job, which was her entire identity, and then that was shattered, and she saw that she had nothing, and she's like, well, if I have nothing, then I'm going to do something.
Right, but it still doesn't make sense to me that you wouldn't use the skills that you had gained over the years, even the skills that you gained through those years, in order to make the decisions for your new goal.
Not
like
necessarily.
Her new goal is saving her sister. I mean, to not use the skills that you got, I guess I'm seeing it from more of a logical point of view, and her actions are not logical.
Correct, because people who get their identity shattered don't act out of logic. When you're having an emotional reaction to something, not to bring in the real world, but to bring in the real world, it's like in psychology, when people get their life shattered, they have so many emotions going on, they don't have the time for logic, which is why the military breaks people down so that they have emotional reactions, and then they show them, hey, this is how you regiment yourself in the midst of chaos. But like average people, and I'm going to call a royal person like an average person, like aren't taught those things, because that's like a very specific skill set of like harnessing your emotions amidst sheer chaos, which most people aren't taught with. So like when someone has their identity shattered, whether it's you lose a child or you have a miscarriage or your father like chooses your sister over the one task that your whole life was moving toward, of course you're going to make an emotional decision and not think logically, because humans are emotional and irrational. Like when I don't know if you can think of a time, and you don't have to share this on the episode, but like when you had an emotional reaction to something big in your life, you probably weren't thinking, okay, let me calm down, let me do my arithmetic, what is the correct decision to make here? You probably said, I want to burn that house down because he did something to you, right? You weren't thinking logically. I know that as a person who likes to think that I'm pretty logical, I have huge emotions sometimes. And that's my defense here for Viviana, which is like when you're prepared for something, your whole life is shattered, and you're in the throes of emotions, people do wild things that seem irrational because they're not rational.
I guess I could see that. Usually when I get emotional and worked up and something like that, I try to remove myself from whatever stupid decision I'm about to make. Go punch, go to a punching bag.
I know, lady.
Go to a punching bag for a while.
Rent a rage room for an hour and a half?
Yeah, something like that, and then return with a clearer mind, basically.
Torture some animals.
I'm not Tonka.
Or Non-Balat.
or an umbrella. Here's the thing. I understand what Jonathan is saying and why he's bringing it up, but I think Vivenna still can be an unlikable character. She's starchy.
My new favorite insult that I've added in my dictionary today.
Yeah. And that's okay. That makes it a good story. A girl who's had her identity shattered, thrown into an unpredictable situation with things she doesn't understand, because knowing what fork to eat the salad with and what to say to Blushweaver and what not to say to Blushweaver and how to sit and curtsy doesn't help you with anything at all, ever, except maybe just that one portion of that political portion of your life. So it's obvious why she's making dumb decisions, whether she should or shouldn't. But the character itself, in me, and obviously in Casey, the emotional response to her is like, you're kind of annoying and dumb.
Like you were saying, humans are emotional and irrational beings. So we're having an emotional and irrational reaction. That's just expected by your own logic.
I will give you that one, just because we have been bantering on this one topic for a while. But I have thoughts to that.
So it's finally uncovered. It's finally uncovered that Jonathan has an unbridled, unquenchable love for Vivenna.
Oh, it's not unquenchable. I 100% will agree with you that she's starchy. I just think that I think it's nice that you guys had an emotional reaction to a character. I think that's very good. I think that that's good storytelling, right? I think it lacks insight that she would be judged based on her actions when it's like very clear why she's doing those actions, to be disliked for being herself, because for all the reasons that I stated earlier, I'm not going to restate them. But
that's a hell of an accusation. I have plenty of insight, and I can still find her unlikable. So I don't think so, dude. Not even a bit. Curb your enthusiasm.
I will not. That's what the rub is here. I really didn't think that Vivenna would be the large contention point in this book. I was pretty sure it was going to be Vasher or Blushweaver or even Lightsong or Denth even, but not like the ignorant princess who goes and gets thrown on the street to become a whore.
Listen, the later parts of her actions, the later parts, do not factor into the initial impression that she gives. First impressions are important, and the first impression we got of her was the royal brat. So she changed. I can acknowledge she changed. I enjoy her character now that she has changed. But it doesn't stop the fact that her initial impression and her first impression was what we're saying.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. I said it was good that you guys had, an emotional reaction to a character. That's fine. I'm just here to challenge things. You don't have to agree with me. That's part of what makes this conversation interesting. Slava and I disagree on a bunch of stuff.
That we do.
I come from a long line of arguers, so this is
except for the city and the city, which I eventually won him over for.
Yeah, you certainly did.
Coerced even.
I was under duress. I wanted the episode to end.
Wait. So in the midst of emotional duress, you made a decision that wasn't necessarily logical? Spencer, any thoughts?
What
appeal to
I have my thoughts. I don't know how spectacular they are, but I just want to say Vivenna ended up being my favorite character, partially, and I said this before, I think, but I relate to her the most. I was raised in a conservative situation, and so I find, while yes, she is ignorant and can be a brat to people, to me, going to Jonathan's point, I understand why she did the things she did and said the things that she said, because when you're raised in a conservative situation like I was very sheltered, very cut off from the world. I was told that anyone who does not agree with our religion or our way of doing things is bad. It's all a deception of Satan, at least in my world. But for Vivenna, probably same thing. Their religion was monotheistic, and so of course she viewed Hallandren as outsiders, and they're the bad guys. When she goes there and she sees them, of course she's going to think negatively of them, and everything that they do is, I forget now what she originally, like some of the thoughts that she had, but basically they were doing wrong in her eyes. Like, of course she's going to think that. That's what she's been constantly fed her whole life. So her change doesn't come about immediately, and she doesn't just start making good decisions all of a sudden because she decides to go on a journey to save her sister. So it does take a while for her to grow, but I think there comes a point when she is confronted with her own mortality, when she's thinks she lost all her breaths that she originally gained, and now she's on the streets and about ready to sell herself to be able to eat. She finally starts to understand what it means to be human, what it means to be a part of Hallandren, and not everybody there is just this evil person out to make war with Idris. Yeah, so I really appreciate her character growth, and so to me, I really understand, maybe I don't understand, but I can definitely see why she makes the decisions that she does and acts the way she does in the beginning of the book.
What I think is beautiful about Vivenna and Ciri is their character arcs are earned. It's not, here's a nice way of tidying up the story, and yay, Ciri does get the happy ending. So there's a little bit of that there, maybe a little bit of a, time to finish the book. But the character themselves, I think their arcs are earned.
Yes, I agree.
When you see Vivenna with that street urchin where she has to buy bread from him or something, and he's being a complete asshat to her, or when she is walking around in despair about to sell her body, you feel for her. Just doesn't matter if she's annoying or starchy or I don't know, whatever. You still feel for her as a human being because you're like, holy crap, that is a low place to be. So I'll end my point on Vivenna and Ciri here is their character arcs are well earned. And maybe especially Vivenna more than so Ciri. To whoever said that in the beginning, I think it was you, Spence.
In order to be, if you'll pardon my French, in order to be the shit, you got to go through shit.
It's a good way to put it. I like that.
Spencer's about to go get a tattoo after this. Casey's words of wisdom. He'll just text you a tattoo later.
Right.
Bro, look what I did.
I'll show it to you next time I'm on the podcast.
It's temporary.
Oh, no, we only have real ones here, Chief.
And to make sure it's got a misspelling in it.
It's written
No
in Chinese
raggarts.
characters.
Yeah.
Or Sumerian.
Sumerian.
Oh, we've divulged, though. But this was great. Any final thoughts, folks, on this book? It was pretty lively. I appreciate the input.
My final thoughts, and I'll let you guys land the plane for us. This is a perfect book to introduce somebody to the Cosmere, specifically Brandon Sanderson's writing style, this type of fantasy. I appreciate that we started with this one, Jonathan, because it really opened up a whole new world for me, if I may be that bold.
Slava, before you finish your final thoughts, give us your rating of the book. So final thoughts and then rating. So 1 to 5 is our rating system, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 5 means no changes required. 1 means you should burn the book. So any ratings in between half points also count. 4s, we usually offer if we believe the book was really good, but we had 1 or 2 really important changes we would have liked seen. So that's the rating system. So as you're giving your final thoughts here, each of us will go around and give final thoughts and then also the rating system. So Slava, what are your ratings on characters, world, and plot?
So let me finish my other thought and go into that.
Love it.
So glad that I read the book. I think I've recommended it to at least 10 people. But let's do some ratings now and officially land the plane. So for characters, a 5. For world, a 5. For plot and story, I'm going to say a 4 to 4.5 because I am missing that portion of the rebellion. And this came to me this morning. As I was doing some organization of my notes here. I was like, you know what? The rebellion could have used more exposition than what we get from Vasher and I forget who else. An extra 15 pages to a 650-page book wouldn't have killed Brandon Sanderson to write me a little history. And that's all. So 5, 4.5. And Casey, let's do you since you're a first-time reader.
So for the characters, I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5. I'd say that a lot of the characters are really well written, even Vivenna. The one complaint I would have is that several of the major side characters, like Bluefinger and Larimar, to a certain extent, only get a massive amount of information and characterization revealed at the very end of the story. I would have felt like an extra 10 pages or something, just a little more, maybe half a chapter devoted to each of them and their perspectives, just so that we could get a hint before the big end of climax reveal about everything, would help flesh out their motivations of their characters a bit more, because one of them goes from this really nice side priest of Lightsong, who is sort of like his buddy cop, to, oh yeah, I was your best friend when you were in a previous life.
Brother, in fact.
The other one goes from behind the scenes manipulator sort of guy to, oh yeah, I'm gonna murder a guy and murder a girl and make it look like someone else did it. For the plot, I did another 4.5 out of 5. I would say the last bit, if they'd had those 2 chapters, maybe the one focused on Bluefinger in particular, it would have helped to show where the sudden escalation comes from. Because without it, it sort of comes off as semi-abrupt, whereas the rest of the pacing throughout the plot is very nicely done, very put together, and a slow escalation that's building up to this potential war. So it was World. 5 out of 5 for World. The world itself is nicely put together. I like the limitations put on the magic system. Funny enough, I was actually thinking in my head, as a character, thing as well, you could put those rules in, like, don't introduce a new character when the current situation can be solved by a previous one. Always, expand your current lore rather than add on new lore before it's ready. And the limitations and flaws of a character are more important than how strong they are. It works. Brandon Sanderson is a genius.
Agreed.
Yes. Spencer, how many pages do you want added to the book?
What's that? Carry the 7 minus 25.
So we're at 50 additional pages here so far.
42.
I'll talk to I'll talk the meaning of life.
Talk to management. Yeah.
I'll send it to management.
Right.
Excuse me, Brandon.
We feel
there should be at least an additional 50 pages about these multiple topics.
I don't really think there's anything that I would change. I do like the points that you guys brought up. I think it would be nice to see a little bit more of Larimar for me in particular. It'd be cool to maybe see a little bit more of him and Lightsong's relationship before Lightsong died the first time. That would be cool to see. But outside of that, I don't think there's anything that I would change. So I would say, and this might be my bias towards Brandon, but I'd give a 5 to everything there. I don't think we need anything in the world to change. It does seem limited in scope, but you don't need anything extra because that's not the story that he's trying to tell. So for me personally, I would like a little bit more lore of the book, the history Slava said about the original, the Many War, I think, how the whole treaty thing was set up and why they split originally. But I don't think, again, I don't think that's the story that Brandon was trying to tell. It was necessary so we have context. That's why I hope we get either a prequel or sequel, or in the sequel he tells more of the origin. I think that might be why we don't have as much as we would like, because he does plan at some point to write a sequel. So those are my thoughts on that.
Right. The book is perfect. You know how they say certain movies are just perfect because they have all the right elements and they just tell a story well, and it ends well, it begins well, the arcs are good, the 3 acts are flawlessly, as much as one can be flawless, are executed flawlessly. This is a perfect book in that sense. We're sure this can be changed, and there maybe a more character development can be made with here, more exposition here, more history there. But as a book, to me, it seems like a perfect book. It starts well. The arcs are well earned. The characters are well written. The pace is flawlessly executed. I think the way the pace is done, and I've said this about every single Brandon Sanderson book I've read, and now I've read 4.5 or 4 2/4 or whatever, right? So, which is a half. Wow. Mind blown. I'm
Big
Math.
brain over here. Big brain.
Big brain, yeah.
Math is
Making
hard.
those real calculations.
By itself, as a standalone introduction book to the Cosmere, being the 5th one published by Sanderson, he's seasoned enough to write a book that's not clunky. He already has a world in his mind's eye, and this is a great snippet of it.
Yeah, totally agree. Mine are 5s across the board. The first time I read this book, I thought this was the most profound magic system I'd ever encountered. The prologue, which I have unendingly spoken about. Vasher, favorite character. Lightsong, favorite character. Vivina, favorite character. Ciri, favorite character. Susebron, favorite character. I'm just going to go through the list here. Blushweaver, not favorite character. But needed for her station. Needed
What
for her
about
station.
Kind Winds and Hope Finder?
Hope Finder, big fan. Have a jersey of Gift Beacon over there on the wall. So I just buy jerseys I've returned at those athletic stores online. Print your own jerseys. Yeah, for me, it's why I recommended it to Slava. It's why I've recommended it to other people. Like, it's really just exactly what Slava said. It's Sanderson showing that he has writing chops at a caliber he hadn't yet achieved in his writing career. And from this point, even greater, his other books are more well developed as an author, which is phenomenal. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. Like, yep, there's things that I'd change. Yep, I want to understand the harmonics and hues better. Yep, I'm more interested in, like, how the origin stories occurred. But overall, like, 5s. So, definitely love that. But thank you all for joining us today on SideQuest. And thank you, Casey, for joining us today. Hopefully, my pressure that I put on you to challenge your Vivina complications didn't scare you away, and you'd come back on it with us again. Just like to cause a little drama, so that keeps it interesting. Anyway, really happy that you joined us. Really happy that you read the book and enjoyed it as well. So, and Spencerton, I'll see you around.
Yeah, I'll see you around. Also, just to say, Jonathan, your pronunciation of Vivenna is wrong. It's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Vivenna deserves better. Say her name. Right.
Say the name right. Vivenna.
Say my name.
Say my name.
All right.
Well,
Well,
great being invited by guys. It's great having a talk.
absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next literary jaunt, only on SideQuest.
Did you want to do that again?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
No, Spencer will do it.
No, you guys don't want me.
Spencer!
You guys don't want me doing the outros.
I do want you doing the outros.
No, you don't.
Casey, chant with me. Spencer.
All right,
Spencer.
so I can forget the name of the podcast again.
Yeah. So just read our thing there. That's what I try to do.
All right, here we go. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today on SideQuest. Be sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next literary jaunt. Only here on SideQuest.
Hey, you did it this time.
Hey, I got it.